Yes, what is up? Nolsey here, one half of the FPL Draft Duo, and today we're going to be ranking midfielders in the FPL Draft Mode. So today I'm going to be looking at midfielders that I think you should target on draft night, and more importantly, what round you should pick them up in. The best thing about the draft is that we decide the value of players. So if we pick them early, they're more valuable. If we pick them late, they're less valuable. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing. So today we want to figure out midfielders, which are the best ones, and where we should pick them for the best value. So better drafting essentially means picking the best players as late as possible. So if we can pick up a player around later than we were going to, we might have got an advantage on the other players. The best thing about draft night is that we don't know what's going to happen. So that's where the excitement comes into it, but also we have to navigate our way through that without knowing if the player is going to be there or not. So if you really want a player, don't go holding out a round or two just to get the best value. At the end of the day, the person with the best team will probably win. So if you wait too long and miss out on them good players, you're going to have a subpar team and you're going to be struggling all season. So we want to make a nice mix of timing the picks right and going for the best picks. So we are looking at round 1 to 5 plus. Now I will be doing a video on midfielders essentially under the radar, anyone you can get after round 5, and there is a lot of them. So make sure to look out for that one. But today we're going to be focusing on a 12 manager league, and if you tend to play in less or more, you can adjust accordingly. There are going to be a lot of changes, I presume, from now until game week 1. Injuries, transfers, pre-season is going to dictate a lot, but it is the 2nd of August now, and based on what I've saw so far, this is what I think. Already there's been a lot of changes in the forwards. Darwin I thought would have been round 1. Now that Jota's playing well, I'd knock him down. Gabriel Jesus has been playing very well. I'd knock him up maybe to round 3. So there's always going to be changes, and I'll indicate what players I think might move up and down from now until game week 1. So I've collated a lot of information from mock drafts over the last few nights, and I'm going to continue to do the same thing until essentially a couple of days before game week 1. And that gives me a great understanding of where managers are evaluating particular players. Just by going through the first round picks, we can see that it's going to be influenced an awful lot by strikers. So kind of inversely compared to the forwards, a lot of forwards who mightn't actually score as much as these midfielders will be picked earlier because of the way the draft works. Whereas some midfielders who I think will be fantastic picks might be round 3 and 4 just because players are going to, rightly so, prioritise a forward. So Saka has been drafted in number 2 a couple of times, I think twice. Apart from that, it has been Haaland, Salah, and then the majority of times Saka. After that comes Palmer, and maybe a Watkins or an Isaac in between there. In terms of midfielders, the next midfielder, these two players have been swapping places in the majority of mock drafts. If one's 8th, the other's 9th, or vice versa, and that's Son and Foden. Now we have upsides and downsides of both of these players. Son could play through the middle. Now, another player who we're going to mention has played through the middle for Spurs. So if Son stays left wing, there's very little between him and Foden. Foden we know may miss the first couple of games, but in the draft we're not too worried about that. 2 games, if a player is going to be unbelievable for the rest of the season, is not too hectic. Now, for some reason, I'm leaning towards Son. I think it's because I've owned him before. He's guaranteed 90 minutes. And there's a possibility of him playing up top. But conversely, if Spurs do sign some forward, I think it's justifiable to go Foden. Here, I think it's a personal preference. Further down the list, and these two are kind of separate from the others because I think them 5 players are guaranteed round 1. I suppose this depends on the size of your league. Odegaard and Bruno tend to be picked very late in round 1, if not very early in round 2 in a 12 manager league. There's upsides and downsides to both of them, and I still would definitely target them if you were late picking like 10, 11, 12 in a 12 person league. I think they could be a fantastic second round pick if you prioritise a forward first. Now, trying to split between the two of them, I'm a United fan, I love Bruno, but Arsenal are so superior as a football team that I think it's going to be easier for him to get points even though Bruno has penalties. I think it could be a toss-up. I think Bruno will 100% have a better season than he did last season in terms of FPL points. So again, this could be personal preference, but if you want to go for the more solid team, again, that will probably score more goals, Arsenal are definitely that team. On to our round 2 picks, and we could have some value here in KDB. Now, I am not too hot on him. When I was in a couple of mock drafts and I saw that I was the next pick and he was available, I was nearly fearful that I might have to pick him. But there's a couple of question marks over KDB. We don't know how fit he is. He went through a big injury last season. There was talks of him moving away. He's probably not going to. He could be very, very good this year. If you pick him in the second round, I think that's super, super value because, yes, he might get rested some games, but he wasn't your first round pick. You might have a top level striker or possibly one of these midfielders beforehand. I think picking KDB round 1 ahead of any of the other midfielders feels like too much of a risk for me this year because, again, he's a lot of question marks. It could be his last season. He could absolutely rip it up and he could be very good value at the start of round 2. If we're looking at other players, and I think these 4 players, there's very little to separate them. Now, in terms of stats, Eze does come out, or did come out last season on top in terms of points per 90. But Bowen, Eze, Gordon and Maddison are fantastic picks. West Ham are in the process of signing Somerville, so that's going to add to West Ham's attack force. We could see Bowen play up top sometimes. Kudos off the right. If that happens, I think Bowen, fantastic pick. A lovely, solid pick in your team. Eze, we know what his numbers are like. And the best thing about Eze is that because of these new bonus point system, he tends to get a lot of shots off. And I think it was like 1.2 shots on target per game last year. So you could pick up some extra bonus points just for his involvement in the game. Anthony Gordon had a sick season last season, unbelievable at home, but there is some question marks over him. Liverpool were interested in Anthony Gordon, and I think if he went to Liverpool, he'd go down my ranking slightly, although they're a better side. It's just that they have so many players available, and you'll notice that I don't have Jota, I don't have Luis Diaz, I don't have Gakpo Gakpo's a forward. I don't have any of them in my rankings in any of the videos so far because I just don't know who's going to play. I had Darwin up top, but again, Jota's played very, very well in pre-season. I can't put my finger on it. I think someone's going to get one of those players as good value, but I just don't know who yet. So if Anthony Gordon stays at Newcastle, I think he's a top tier pick. Maddison, just behind him, if not before him, I think could be a really, really good pick this season. And if you get him towards the end of round 2, I think you've got good value. The signing of Archie Gray was massive for Maddison because Maddison played an awful lot of deep lying football for Spurs last season. And I think if Archie Gray holds down that number 6 position, he's less inclined to have to come back deeper and link up and start to play it. But if he does eventually go into that number 10 role, I think he's going to be a fantastic pick, and hopefully he comes down the list slightly. Hopefully you could get him at the end of round 2. Now, 2 players in round 3 could 100% be justified of picking in round 2, but again, I'm using the data from the mock drafts that I've done and seeing where people tend to pick them. Nkunku and Mbeumo have been really, really late round 2, if not early round 3. In my estimation, if you get Nkunku round 3, that's great value because if you look at Chelsea's pre-season, if you've watched any of it, Nkunku has been the main man. He has been linking up play, he's been scoring goals, and I think he's going to be a really, really good midfielder. I know there's massive hype about him because he's 6.5 in normal fantasy, and I think at 6.5 he should be the first person in your team. But in the draft, I'm hoping people tend to pick him maybe round 3. Any one of those, Nkunku, even Mbeumo, round 3 could be put into round 2. And if you pick up maybe a striker or one of these top midfielders along with one of these round 2 midfielders, your team is going to be really, really set, and you're going to have a great base to the team. If you get a striker and 2 of any of these players, from round 1, 2 or 3, your team is going to be in really good shape. Now round 4 is where we can make some moves, where we can actually gain some ground on other players if we make the right decisions. There's 7 players here that could be very good value if you get them this late. From top to bottom, Gibbs White and Kudos I think are going to be great picks this season. Forest's first 10 to 12 fixtures are unreal, so you're going to get loads of value for Gibbs White if he starts to go off, and maybe you want to upgrade him to another player that you think might have a good rest of the season. Kudos, I owned him in 2 drafts last year. He's a dream to own. He's so consistent, 5 and 6 points at a time. Those are the players that are going to get you the wins. And then Leon Bailey, a bit of a hero last year, but a lot of the time he was on the waiver because we didn't know when he's going to start. With the sale of Diaby, Bailey's position is not set, but it's a lot more solid. And I think if you're getting him in round 4, he could be really explosive. Villa have added some great midfielders, not wingers per se, a lot of central midfielders. So Bailey could be prime for a nailed position. The next 2 players, Kulusevski has been right on the fringe of round 4. He's been late round 3, early round 4 in a lot of the drafts. And that's because he's been very good in preseason. He's played up top a lot. And if he continues to play through the middle, he's definitely value at round 4. Last season, I don't think I'd have picked him in round 4. He was a rotation risk, always played off the right. And then when Johnson came in, got rested sometimes, but was, for the most part, a solid player in Ange's team. So if he can nail down a position, especially up top, I definitely think he can be value. The issue comes in when we look at the next player, Brennan Johnson. We have 2 similar players and we don't really know exactly where they're going to play. This is why I kind of have them coupled up together around 4. I think these are 2 of the players that are going to change in my rankings prior to game week 1, but definitely 2 to keep an eye on, especially for value. And then 2 players that have gone round 2 and 3, even round 1 sometimes in previous drafts, Rashford and Martinelli, and both of them have been in and out of the team. Rashford had a really poor season last season, has just picked up an injury, so I think we'll go under the radar even more. I think if he's coming back to fitness around, a couple of days beforehand, round 4, great pickup. Martinelli playing very well in preseason, so he might actually go earlier. I don't know if I'd be taking the risk on Martinelli any sooner than round 4, if even round 4, if a lot of these other players are available, just because it's that looming idea of Trossard left wing. Jesus has sometimes slotted in left wing. Havertz has come back into midfield, so Jesus up top. There's a lot of different orientations that Arsenal could take. I still think Martinelli is an unbelievable player and should be in their starting 11, but is he going to be there every day? And if we're picking up our first 4 players on the draft, they're going to have to be really good players. They're going to have to be nailed players, and they're going to have to be essentially the base of your team. So minimizing the amount of rotation risks, if at all possible, is the way to go in very early rounds, especially for midfielders. Round 5, we have 3 players down here. Garnacho in round 5 I think is super value. I think he could even outscore Rashford this season. It's just, or value. Rashford we think should be higher, but I think if you're getting Garnacho, he is tending to go around 5, round 6 maybe. I don't think I'd be putting him ahead around 4 players, Gibbs White, Kudos, but I think he has the potential to match, if not better them. I just think for value you can get him around 5. The other 2 players are Wolves players who can be explosive, can be very good solid players in your team. If you got these as a third midfielder, your midfield is going to be very solid. You're probably going to have a forward and you're going to be very well set for the season ahead. So if both these stay fit and they have decent seasons, like 15 goals and assists, more or less, that's going to be a great addition to your team. And it's players like this that are like the third midfielder in your team, that are putting down solid seasons, that are going to dictate how well you do in the draft. If you add these with a couple of under the radar hidden gems that we're going to give to you, you could be set up for a really good season. So here we have it. A lot of my priorities personally that I'm going to be targeting on draft night in order of where I think they're valued and where I think you can get them. Please let me know if you would change these rankings in any way, if there's players left out that you think you should definitely be targeting. But so far, based on preseason injuries, transfers, I'm looking at these. Hopefully there will be more, and we will update you on all socials, Twitter, Instagram, so on and so forth. Make sure you're following. FPL Draft Duo out. Boom.